Welcome to Lifelines. Today's story will shake your heart and remind you that justice always finds its way, no matter how long it takes. The night was quiet, the moon casting silver ripples across the lake. A little girl's laughter echoed faintly, but it wasn't joy, was fear. That girl was Amara, just 11 years old, holding on desperately to the edge of a wooden dock. Her stepfather, a man with cold eyes and a cruel smile, stood above her. "You don't belong here," he hissed. Amara's mother had died only a month earlier, leaving her the heir to everything her mother owned. A beautiful house, a thriving business, security for the future. But to her stepfather, Richard, Amara was not just a stepdaughter, she was an obstacle. Worse, in his eyes, she was a stain on his reputation. She was black, and he despised that truth. That night, Richard thought he could erase her from his world forever by letting her drown in the dark waters. But fate had other plans. Amara remembers the icy water pulling her down, her lungs screaming for air. She thought it was the end, but just when she felt herself slipping away, strong hands grabbed her. A fisherman who often worked late nights by the lake heard her splashes and cries. He pulled her out, coughing and trembling, and took her to safety. The man never told Richard he had saved Amara. Instead, he brought her to his sister in another town, where she was sheltered, protected, and raised with love. For years, Amara lived quietly, hidden from the man who had wanted her gone. She grew stronger, smarter, and more determined with every passing day. She excelled in school, graduated with honors, and built a life of her own. But deep inside, one thought never left her mother's property. Her rightful inheritance was still in Richard's hands. And Richard had no idea she was still alive. Years later, Amara returned, not as the helpless girl he had once tried to destroy, but as a confident young woman with power in her voice and fire in her heart. When she walked back into town, whispers spread. People couldn't believe their eyes. Everyone thought she had drowned. Yet here she was, alive, radiant, and determined. Amara didn't rush into confrontation. She studied Richard first. He was still living in the grand house that her mother had left behind. He was enjoying the wealth that was never his. He had twisted the story, telling everyone that Amara had run away after her mother's death because she couldn't handle life. He had painted himself as the grieving widower. But Amara knew the truth, and this time she had proof. With the help of a lawyer and the old fisherman who had saved her, she began to build her case. Documents showed her mother's will. Everything was meant to go to Amara. Witnesses remembered seeing Richard that night by the lake. Slowly, the pieces came together. But Amara wasn't just after property. She wanted Richard to feel the same fear and helplessness he once forced upon her. The day came when Amara finally faced him. She walked through the doors of the mansion with her head held high. Richard froze. His face turned pale, as if he had seen a ghost. You're supposed to be dead," he stammered. Amara smiled calmly. "I was supposed to be, but you forgot one thing, Richard. Truth doesn't drown." She laid out the evidence before him, the will, the testimonies, the story of the fisherman who saved her life. Richard tried to bluster, to threaten, but his power was slipping through his fingers. The lawyers confirmed what Amara already knew: the mansion, the business, the wealth, it all belonged to her. Neighbors gathered outside, shocked as the truth came to light. The same man who had paraded himself as honorable was now exposed as a liar, a thief, and a coward. Richard begged, pleaded, even fell to his knees. But Amara stood firm. You tried to erase me because you thought my skin made me less, she said, her voice steady. But today, it's the very strength that makes me rise. In the end, Richard lost everything. The court stripped him of the house and business. His reputation was shattered, and he was left with nothing but his own bitterness. Amara, however, didn't let hatred consume her. She restored her mother's legacy, turning the house into a community center for children in need, kids who, like her, had once been made to feel unwanted. She offered them education, shelter, and hope. Her story spread far and wide, inspiring many who had suffered injustice to rise and fight for their own truth. And as she stood by the lake one evening, the same place where her nightmare began, Amara whispered, "You tried to drown me, but instead you taught me how to swim against every storm." Her journey was not just about reclaiming property, it was about reclaiming her identity, her strength, and her destiny. And in the end, Amara proved that no matter how deep someone tries to bury you, you can always rise stronger, brighter, and unstoppable. What are your thoughts on this story? Comment and subscribe, Lifelines.